Alright guys, real quick, just going to use this opportunity to shill my other platforms. You can find all my links on my Linktree page. The main pages I'm going to be using other than YouTube are going to be Minds, Odyssey, BitChute, Rumble, and Truth Social. So if you guys want to give me a follow over on those other platforms, I'd really appreciate it. But without further ado, let's get into the video. Hello everyone, Jigsaw0097 here today, making another video. This one is about the new atheist movement and the recent Sam Harris interview. And so I guess that this interview took place on the Triggernometry channel, which I don't really watch, but from what I'm told, it's one of those like cringy new atheist sites, kind of like The Amazing Atheist and like Vouch and stuff like that. But essentially, I'm making this video because I recently watched a podcast with Aaron McIntyre and Alex Kashuta. I hope I'm saying her name right. And then I also recently watched another really long stream by the Distributist about this as well. So I'm going to be kind of, I guess, adding to what they said. And if you guys want to check those videos out, I'll leave those in the link. Highly recommended to check those out. They're very informative. But essentially what it got me thinking about, guys, is that new atheism and liberalism, to be more specific, was supposed to replace Christianity. That was like the original goal of the Enlightenment, and specifically the new atheism of, I don't know, probably started with Gen X and went through to millennials. I myself am a millennial, but the millennials are now in their 30s, almost early 40s, and the Gen Xers are well into their 50s, most of them by now, late 40s. And if you watch the Sam Harris interview, he essentially admits the quiet part out loud. He essentially admits that he didn't care if the media rigged the Hunter Biden laptop story, because letting Trump in office would have been far worse than that. And he does say something along the lines of Hunter Biden could have had dead children in his basement, and it still would not have been as bad as Trump getting reelected in 2020. And to me, what this really alludes to is that these people have such a reliance on the system, as you would call it, which would be the cathedral, as Aaron McIntyre likes to call it, and I like that term. Sam Harris is essentially admitting that as well. He's essentially admitting that there is a secret cabal of people that are trying to control certain flows of certain information in the world, and that Trump was a threat to that, which is something I long theorized. I started to really pay attention to this in like 2017, 2018, with the constant attacks on Trump. And I read a couple books about this during that time as well. One of them is called Killing the Deep State by Jerome Corsi, which pretty much goes over the Russia hoax and the Steele dossier. Pretty fascinating still, actually. If you guys want to check that one out, it goes over a lot of what went down there. And then also kind of a less relevant book now, but I read it at the time. I think this came out in 2020, was Blitz, Trump Will Smash the Left and Win by David Horowitz. This was just another interesting book into basically what Trump was going through during his presidency in regards to the deep state. And if you guys don't know what the deep state is, essentially the deep state is a branch of bureaucrats. These are unelected people that are running the government behind the scenes. This is why the whole party system seems very blurred nowadays, because you have Republicans and you have Democrats that are part of the bureaucracy because they're getting donors. They have donors. They're getting kickbacks. You know, that a lot of the bills that they write, the whole like pork barrel spending, they will write bills that will kick back to them and their friends. And oftentimes that is both Republicans and Democrats. And then there's this third entity, which could be called the deep state or the shadow government, which is kind of running the show behind the scenes because they are the financiers. A really good example of this, if you want to research it, is start researching George Soros, and then also just look no further than the Clintons. But anyway, not to get off on too much of a tangent there, and get back to the new atheism thing. So the new atheism thing, essentially to me, and this is something I've been observing with lots of different movements, whether it be feminism, the LGBT movement, the whole race, Black Lives Matter type movements, is essentially what the government is trying to do, and specifically the hard left Democrats. They're trying to create a class of useful idiots. Now, if you guys aren't familiar with the term useful idiots, this was used in reference to Stalin's Russia, whereas essentially the theory is they help you get into power, and then the moment you get into power, you just ignore everything about them. And in Stalin's case specifically, he sent a lot of them to gulags. And so that out of the way, the new atheism movement was just part of this class, right? The duped class, where, as far as I can see it, to sum it up, is that there's this war against Christianity as a whole, and people desperately looking for something to replace it. The problem is that now we have this little thing called woke that just kind of showed up and subsumed all of culture, and specifically the Democratic Party. And there's probably a lot of Democrats that don't even like this, because, you know, things like what is a woman, and is gender a thing, and are white people racist, you know, are white people inferior to black people, like all of these things are now at the forefront again. So it's almost like a reverse civil rights movement. It's the way I've always thought of the woke, where you had the civil rights movement, which was for all of these things, which, to be honest, I have a lot of criticisms of the civil rights movement in general, because in many ways I feel like the civil rights movement led to this. But that's beside the point. Essentially, the woke is in the name of equity and justice and equality, right? To save women and to help the oppressed people of color, right? That we're going to just reverse all of society. So the way to save women is we have to not even define women, and the way to stop the patriarchy is we have to call all men toxic, and the way to stop race is that we got to give reparations to black people, and we got to let anyone immigrate to America that wants to. Just stuff like that. And so in a way, I think Sam Harris, and I haven't checked out the other new atheists. This is really just more about the Sam Harris thing, because I didn't really even know who this guy was until recently, guys. I'd heard the name Sam Harris, but I didn't know he was an atheist. I thought he was like one of the just like normie Democrat commentators, but yeah, I'll have to look more into him. But essentially what I'm seeing out of this new atheism, and I'm just making this video mostly because I've debated with a lot of atheists in my personal life, and essentially what it is they want to get rid of Christianity, but they have no solution. And what we're seeing is that when you just get rid of something, this kind of happened in Iraq, right? Is that we went in and the U.S. military went in and we invaded Iraq, and we like toppled the city in like a matter of days. I was really young at the time, so I don't really remember it. And if you guys, any Zoomers listening, you guys were like babies at the time, so you probably really don't remember it. But essentially what happened is they took the city, and it left a vacuum. And over time, we were there for so long. This is what happened. This is what formed ISIS. So the reason I'm making this point is because when you get rid of something, the simple absence of something creates a hole, or like a power vacuum, so to say. So in this instance, the new atheists fought so hard, the new atheists and the feminists and you know, all these things, basically the Democratic Party, really, because that's where most of them go. They fought so hard to get rid of the Christian aspect of America in almost every way society functions to this point. Like they've pretty much shamed it from existence in every conceivable way from the way that we experience society today. But what happened is that left a void, and I don't think these people ever thought how to fill that void. Now in the past, right, with people like Stalin or Hitler or Mussolini, You can go over the whole Mao Zedong. These people had a clear goal in mind, which was central planning, and I have my own theories about that with our own government. But those guys had a clear plan. It's like we get rid of Christianity and then we just create a state religion. And so ultimately, that's probably what would happen in our case if this continues the way it continues. Is that currently, we have a Biden administration, Biden asterisk steward. I always think of the steward of Gondor when I look at Biden. If you guys don't know who that is, just Google it. And if you haven't seen Lord of the Rings, what the heck? But essentially, we have this stewardship administration right now, and they're just doing a lot of nonsensical things in the name of equity. Like putting Rachel Levine, transgender, overweight man, into the head of the health department, right? Like this is like peak clown world at this point. You've got a guy that doesn't even know what sex he is, and he's completely overweight, telling us what is healthy and what is not. And then you have Dr. Fauci, who's like all over the place when it comes to vaccines and masks, and the guy can't make up his mind at all. Like, I mean, when the whole pandemic even first started, he was telling people not to wear masks. So we have all of these problems right now in society, and there is this thought that they could be going towards the more state approach that past dictators have. But in my opinion, I think it's much simpler than that, where I just think that they wanted so bad to get rid of Christianity this time, but they didn't have a plan of what to do with it. And this Sam Harris interview, to me, I mean, he was even saying things like, we can't prove that God exists because our microscopes, our telescopes, can't find him, right? And again, to quote Aaron McIntyre, because it was really funny, he says, because we can't see God taking a shower through our telescopes, that's proof that God doesn't exist. And this is like really cringe, like Stephen Hawking's level of stuff, as far as just human hubris. I've always observed this. It's just this hubris that we on this little speck of, it's really, if you think of it as like a grain of sand, because if you think about the universe, right, with the stars and the suns and all this, it's like we're like literally a speck of sand on a speck of sand. So to even think that we could glimpse into the Atmos and find heaven is just an arrogant idea in and of itself. And so to me, and this is kind of the title of the video, is that's what new atheism is boiled down to, guys. It's a fart and a whimper. It basically, it started out with this thing for like, I don't know, 30 years really, because this is new atheism. This is these are the people that are the oppressed now, the champagne socialists, you could call them, or I like to call them Starbucks socialists now as well. Biden just helped ease some of their student loans via taxpayer dollars, so that'll be fun. But essentially, it's just created a vacuum, and then they have this woke problem now, and this is what's really funny, because the right, unfortunately, the right for a long time didn't conserve anything, so we allowed this to happen as well. But the left largely created this monster of woke, and what essentially this is that when you remove the absence of religion, humans will just create a religion, and essentially this religion is just a politically charged ideological religion that's all about identity politics. It's all about what race you are. It's all about what gender you are. And you can basically make believe, you can LARP as whatever you want. So it's like the way that men are getting around to this now is it's like, oh, I'm a man, I'm toxic. So the way to get around that is I'll just pretend to be a woman. So this is how you get the trans thing. And by the way, I'll go into all of women's sports and I'll beat them and set all the records. I think like all the records in women's sports now are being set by men. So it's just this really weird irony as far as that goes. But yeah, guys, essentially that's just my thoughts for this video. Don't want to make it too long, but if you guys haven't checked out the Sam Harris interview, I'd highly recommend watching it just for the lulz. But really, if you guys go check out Aaron McIntyre's discussion with Alex, and then also the distributist, those guys have some really good thoughts as well. But essentially it just boils down to nihilism, guys, and narcissism. That's what the world is going through right now. Whether you're Christian or not, I think that a lot of people can admit the value that Christianity brings to society. Me, myself, I'm not personally religious, but I've grown up in a religious home, and I've always valued the things that were taught to me when I was a kid. Even if I didn't agree with all of the teachings of the church, I recognized the community aspect. And a lot of people throw around the term based, but that's kind of how I feel about religion. It teaches you to be based. It teaches you to accept reality for what it is. And maybe the boomers had a point when they were telling the millennials that we were playing too many video games. So anyway, guys, that is the video. Let me know what you think about this Sam Harris interview. Have you watched it? Have you not? I'd love to hear your comments down below. But as always, this has been Jigsaw0097. I will talk to you all later.